Welcome to This Week in Wrestling History.
All right, welcome back to another episode of This Week in Wrestling History. As always, we're your hosts, Ryan and Jacob.
Yo.
So this week, we're going to be going over Royal Rumble 1992.
Probably one of the best Rumble matches.
Best Rumble matches. Rough Rumble card itself is an event.
Yeah. Everything leading up to the Rumble match itself was atrocious.
Yeah, the undercard was just awful. The main event was pretty great, but we'll get into that in a little bit here. First, anything going on this week that we want to cover?
Well, they're kind of doing the whole shakeup of Raw and SmackDown. They're kind of getting full swing into the quote-unquote we're listening to the fans thing.
Yeah, which is apparently kind of weird because apparently the switch in the main event that just happened on Monday of this week was planned for a while.
Which is a little shocking.
It's starting a really weird precedent that started back with Women's Revolution.
Yeah.
Or Evolution, sorry.
I don't know how I feel about the whole thing with Finn Balor jumping into the main event of the Rumble against Brock Lesnar.
Right, which I'm sadly going to guess Finn is going to put on a great match with Brock. I think it's going to be a great match, but Finn's going to lose.
It's going to be par for the course with Brock versus DB, Brock versus AJ twice.
Right. Great matches, Brock eventually winning.
Well, Brock versus AJ once.
Yeah. So everyone kind of, it's going to be a great match. Finn will probably come out of it looking better, but he's not going to get the belt, which how much of that is then really listening to the fans?
Right. So the fans have been clamoring for Braun Strowman to have a belt.
Yeah.
At this point, it doesn't matter which one. He needs a belt, and they've been clamoring for it for a while.
Since Mania of last year.
I mean, he got the tag belts, which he held for a day.
And then Nicholas, yeah, they held the belts for a day, and then were stripped of them, even though, thanks WWE logic, cool, we've had people single-handedly hold the belts before.
And we've also had people switch partners before.
While holding the belts, right.
I mean, just look at Cody Rhodes and Hardcore Holly at one point had the tag titles.
And then Cody faced himself.
Yeah. They were in a match against Ted DiBiase Jr., and he was like, hang on, let me get my partner. And then Cody switched sides.
Swerve, yeah.
Won the belt off of himself?
Yeah, could you have just pinned yourself, or would that have lost the title?
So do you lay on the ground and put your arm over your chest?
Yeah. How does that one work?
But anyway.
Right.
We've had people do something like that before. Why did Braun not get a chance to team with Bray Wyatt again? Anybody.
Thinking back to it, was maybe the excuse that they were telling Braun to pick a new partner and he refused to?
Yeah, and then come Mania, they told him, you can't be in this match unless you have a partner, so he went and grabbed the kid from the crowd.
Right, but then afterwards they say, okay, no, you can't have an 11-year-old child as your partner, you need to pick someone new, and he said, no.
No, it was, you can't have an 11-year-old child as your partner, belts are ours.
What? It's WWE logic is just the worst.
Right. It's like
I'm willing to accept a certain amount, but it's the extents they go in. And this is actually going to come up a little bit later on tonight, I think, where we'll get to some awful WWE logic. But
so you have people clamoring for Braun to get a belt, and they kind of pacified people with the tag belts. They kind of pacified people with him winning the greatest Royal Rumble and getting that oddly really good-looking Saudi Arabian belt. Remember the green one?
Oh, yeah. I forgot there was two of those events last year. They happened pretty close to each other.
Yeah.
I mean, one was in the summer, one was in the late fall, but still.
But, I mean, he gets this fancy new belt.
Which is it's essentially just a trophy.
Which is never shown on TV again. So, don't get me wrong. I'm all for Finn Balor getting a crack at the Universal title that he never lost. But at the expense of Braun Strowman,
Well, at this point, it seems like we're pretty set in stone that Brock is taking the belt to Mania. So Finn is going to be over no matter what. they had that awful heel run of Braun that came out of nowhere and left out of nowhere and was just
Yeah.
awful. So it would have been a little bit more damaging for him to be squashed by Braun or by Brock.
True.
So-
I mean, that already happened at Crown Jewel as it was.
Right. So I think the thinking there is Finn is going to be able to take a loss better than Braun would, and it'll probably be a better match because I'm pretty sure Braun still isn't actually medically cleared.
True. The only thing I can hope is that after Brock versus Seth happens, because that's what's probably going to happen at Mania now,
That's what's everyone theorizing, yes.
we get another Seth versus Finn program for the Universal title.
That'd be a great summer program. I'd be
I
fine
mean,
with that.
going back to who were the two guys to have the match for the inaugural Universal
Right.
title,
It's almost kind of pulling a giant reset on the whole thing after 2 or 3 years now.
which, I mean, at this point, you might as well with the way that title's been held
Right.
up.
That would be just fine in my book. Upsides that happened this week. I really like those women's tag belts.
I still don't know how I feel about them.
I think they'll grow on you. I think they were a little bit influenced by New Japan belt design, and I really like that aspect of it.
I could see that. However, I don't like dead space on a belt. And to me, there looks like there's a lot of dead space on that.
I see where you're coming from, but I like it more than the other WWE belts, than like the main titles, definitely.
Oh, don't get me wrong. They're definitely better than what they have, but
And they're better than the men's tag belts.
looking at the UK men's tag belts in NXT,
Okay, well, all of the UK belts are just amazing. So, yes.
if you haven't seen them, go and look at the NXT UK tag, women's, and heavyweight titles. They are by far the best looking belts WWE has put out since like 1996.
I'd say since the Smoking Skull belt. I really liked the Smoking Skull belt. I think it's the best belt since then, if not even before then.
I was a fan of the Undisputed title when they actually.
Oh, right. That I wasn't watching during then, so going back, I've seen that was good, but since it wasn't while I was watching.
Yeah. But anyway, the UK tag belts in NXT are probably the most gorgeous belts I've ever seen.
Yeah, those are some fantastic design belts. All right. Anyways, moving on.
Otherwise, not really much else happened this week. I mean, so we're recording on Tuesday, so we haven't seen what
Yeah,
happens. in
SmackDown hasn't happened yet. But we still have one more week before Raw, which is kind of weird that they
Rumble.
Sorry. One more week before Rumble, so we still have another go home show, which feels like we kind of pulled the trigger on the main event or on the title picture switch a little bit early.
Well, what's funny is if you've noticed Brock at the big 4 pay-per-views, his title matches have had zero build to them.
I mean, how much can you really build when one of the guys ain't there?
I mean, look at
I mean, you have
Aside from
Heyman,
that-
but
aside from that, look at the build that they had between AJ and Brock at Survivor Series this year.
oh yeah, and then they switched it the week before.
Whoops! It's Daniel Bryan now. Or go back to AJ versus Brock the first time.
It was Jinder versus Brock for a long time,
and then whoops, it's AJ. So now we have it's Braun versus Brock. Whoops! Now it's
yeah, this guy
it's Finn Balor.
It's not fair to Brock.
Yeah, okay.
The man doesn't get time to prepare. It's not fair to Brock.
All right. It's not fair to Flair either, but we'll get to that.
Yeah. Oh, I actually got away from it here for a second. Talking about that main event switch, which is something they did at Evolution, where it was supposed to have been Trish Stratus versus Alexa Bliss, but that was never the plan. They had always planned to have that be a tag match secretly.
Yeah, they kept it in there just to sell tickets, which apparently is what was supposedly happening with this match. They kept it as Braun and Brock up until just recently because of ticket sales.
Right. And so are we really listening to the fans? If they're that good at anticipating what the fans want, being Finn versus Brock, why are you keeping that a secret? It's kind of frightening.
Right.
if that's actually what's happening here.
Because to be honest, if I'm in a place where I could buy tickets to Royal Rumble, go out to Phoenix, I probably would have bought them sooner if I was getting Finn versus Brock.
Right. It's a really weird way to go with things, and I don't know how I feel about that. Because on one hand, you shouldn't be reacting week to week to week and booking on the fly, quote unquote, reacting to the fans.
Yeah, WCW did that, and look at what happened.
Yeah, and but on the other hand, you shouldn't be trying to lie to the fans, and you shouldn't be trying to sell something that you're not going to actually deliver.
Right. You shouldn't be trying to pull one over and then all of a sudden, ooh, surprise, maybe you'll like this better now.
Right. Like in the situation where they had to bring in AJ Styles to face Finn Balor because Bray Wyatt was sick, that's because you actually legitimately couldn't deliver, so you give something above and beyond what you were originally offering. If you're actually trying to plan these things out, that's a sketchy, dangerous way of doing this.
Uh-huh.
All right, so that's what's going on currently. Let's time travel back a little bit. Royal Rumble 1992. So the gimmick to this, let's go back a little bit. We covered Survivor Series 91. That was the pay-per-view that led into this.
Yep.
So, well, kind of. There was
Tuesday in Texas.
this Tuesday in Texas in between. So the lead up here was Undertaker won the title off Hulk Hogan at Survivor Series.
Yep.
This Tuesday in Texas, Hogan underhandedly threw ashes in the face of the Undertaker to win the title back.
Which we'll get into more detail because
Well, that's some of that WWE logic we were talking about earlier.
because I have some very strong feelings on this.
Because of the way Hogan won the belt back, Jack Tunney, the president of the WWF at the time, on air, strips Hulk Hogan of the belt and holds the title up and says, whoever wins the 1992 Royal Rumble becomes the new WWF champion.
Which, okay, cool. I'm fairly certain this was the first time that the title was up for grabs in the Rumble match, was it not?
Right. This is actually one of the... Have they ever done it again besides the one with Roman?
I think those were the only two, if I'm not
Right,
mistaken.
and then it was Roman defending the belt in the Rumble.
Right.
There was no champion going into it. So, yeah, there's your WWE logic of the good guy, quote unquote, cheats to win, which why is the good guy cheating to win, which is
And that's
something we're definitely going to get into a little bit later.
That's one of my biggest things is that Hulk Hogan, quote unquote, biggest baby face of
Of the 80s.
80s to the early 90s.
So this was around when there's a few things happening here. First off, Hogan has overstayed his welcome by this point. That's just something that is happening at this point in time. Second thing was the steroid scandal has now broken, and WWE is now facing down federal court, and things are about to get really bad for Vince, and there's going to be a lot of outside pressure put on Vince. All of that said, I'm going to come right out and say I really don't like Hulk Hogan. I never really did, and this was pinnacle awful Hoganness.
Yeah. I mean, people can argue that nowadays they don't like John Cena for XYZ reasons. The guy isn't so full of himself that he keeps other people down, and he isn't so full of himself that he's trying to make his name the biggest in the company.
Right. He's not trying to put himself over to the detriment of the company. I truly believe, whatever you think about John Cena, that ultimately he wants the WWE to be the best it can be. Obviously, I'm sure he would prefer himself to be in the driver's seat of that or getting the largest cut of money from that he possibly can.
I mean, if you're in the WWE, you probably should be, regardless of your position on the card.
Right. But he's also willing to do business for the sake of business.
Hence, him taking the clean pin from Finn Balor this week on Raw.
He's put a number of people over cleanly. Granted, with guys like KO he would get that win back, but he is definitely willing to put people over cleanly when that's the right thing for business.
Right. On the flip side, you have Hogan, who we'll talk about it when we get to the Rumble match, won't ever do something clean without himself looking strong.
Hogan always needed to be in the spotlight and always needed to be about him, no matter if that was right for the company, whether the company had to take a back seat to him. It's pretty awful, but we'll get to that. Let's start at the top of the card here.
All right. So first match, we have, it was the Orient Express, right?
Yep, Orient Express.
Against the New Foundation.
Yes, the New Foundation. So Orient Express is actually Orient Express version 2.0. Pat Tanaka versus Masked Guy. It used to be a different guy besides the Masked Guy. Masked Guy is actually Paul Diamond,
so
the guy from the 80s.
So not a guy that's of Asian descent at all in the Orient Express?
No.
Okay.
Orient Express was basically your typical jobber team for all intents and purposes. They, if on a pay-per-view, they're probably going to take the loss. Every once in a while, they may win just to kind of keep them credible, but they really weren't going anywhere. New Foundation, more interesting, being the team of Jim the Anvil Neidhart and Owen Hart.
Yeah, and this was Owen's first stint in the WWE without a mask.
Yeah, he had a little bit of a showing as the Blue Blazer back in the 80s, but this is really when this was his real first run. He never really left the company after this.
No. I mean, this was essentially the launching point of Owen Hart's career.
Right. So it's Jim Neidhart and Bret's younger brother reforming the Hart Foundation that Bret was a part of after Bret went and became a single star. So less than a week before the Royal Rumble, Bret actually lost the IC belt. We'll get into that in a little bit because that'll come into a match down the line. But right, this is Owen's first real appearance in the WWF as far as we're really concerned.
Yeah, and the stuff he was doing was pretty solid.
Yeah. Owen was a bit ahead of his time as far as being a bit more of a high flyer. I mean, he wasn't a cruiserweight by today's definitions, and he certainly wasn't doing those moves necessarily, but
no, I mean,
it was a lot more that style than your average WWF guy of the time.
Yeah, I would akin him more at this point to like Flying Brian Pillman back in the early stages of his career.
Definitely. Kind of the light heavyweight style
flying around
of the early 90s.
Yeah, flying around the ring, bouncing off the ropes, jumping off the top rope multiple times and doing stuff like that.
A lot of drop kicks.
Yeah.
A lot of like leaving your feet style thing. So this match goes kind of long.
Yeah, too long. Way too
And
long.
Jim Neidhart is really not great.
He's not good here.
He can be fine.
He gets better.
You never really get much above fine with Jim.
I mean, I would say he's...
First off, I got to say, the 90s outfits on Owen and Jim are ridiculous.
Oh, the colored Zubas with the checkered...
Yeah, they're like solid colored like Zubaz / hammer pants with wrestling boots that are like checkered and fluorescent. It's just an eyesore.
Yeah. So my argument with Neidhart here is, granted, he might not be great. I still wouldn't put him anything less than the Road Warriors. I mean, the Road Warriors did stuff in the ring as a tag team that you swap Hawk out for Heidenreich in the
let's not.
Yeah. Not a good team.
No.
You put Neidhart back into the actual foundation with Bret, or even here with Owen, he's not bad.
That's fair. He does play the good power guy to a lighter partner, so they have a good dynamic as far as that goes. That's fair.
Yeah. So otherwise, though, besides those two, match was not good.
No, it wasn't great. I mean, Owen's part was really good, and this really seemed more of like an extended tryout match for Owen.
I could definitely see that.
It was the do you belong here match. Can you carry a tag team match almost essentially on your back?
Which he did. He did very well.
Right. And Owen would become a tag team guy for very much the early part of his career. Actually, a lot of his career. He was kind of a tag team guy. Eventually teaming with Yokozuna and the British Bulldog. But he would start off with Jim Neidhart and then eventually switch over to Coco Beware, being high energy, which is, again, another very poorly pants-based duo.
Yeah, that's something. But granted, even when he is a tag team guy, still can carry the team. And when he's on his own, I honestly at some point could have seen him with a world title.
There were points there where he was definitely close to that level. I was never a huge Owen fan, but I could see the argument. He was definitely skilled enough. I don't know if he cared. This is going to sound really weird to say it about a Hart. I don't know if he cared enough about the business.
That's fair.
He definitely put his family up before the business,
Which
I don't fault him for.
right. So here's then my argument. If we can have Dean Ambrose as a WWE champion, we probably could have had Owen Hart as a WWE champion.
If Owen was in today, oh man, I just felt sad saying that.
Yeah.
If Owen was around today at the age he was, at the skill level he was during his peak of the WWF time, I agree. The problem was the people you had at the same time as him kind of hitting his stride were Shawn, Brett, Austin,
The
Rock.
Right.
It
even if he was a transitional champion at some point, it still would have been something that I would not, if I was a booker, I would not have shied away from at some point.
I could have seen there would have been a short period in there where you could have maybe replaced Mick Foley with Owen as far as like transitional champs in there a little bit.
Yeah, or
I can see the argument.
Or even have him go and take the WWF title off of Austin at one point. Like he, quote unquote, took the Intercontinental title after breaking his neck.
Yeah, and he definitely had enough of a relation with all of those guys that were champ in the Attitude Era to have a good feud there. He used to be in the Nation with The Rock. He definitely had his Austin issues. Easy to put issues with him and Shawn after what happened to Brett.
Yeah.
If you'd even gone a little bit earlier, rekindled the feud between him and Brett. I mean, there definitely were storylines there, so.
All right. So moving on to so we had Neidhart and Owen go over the Orient Express.
With the worst rocket launcher finisher I've ever seen, with basically it's supposed to be Jim throwing Owen off the top rope into a splash for a little extra oomph.
And it was actually just Owen jumping off the top rope.
It was just Owen jumping off the top with Jim giving him a nice little pat on the ass.
Yeah. So next match, we have the Intercontinental title match.
So as we said a little bit ago, the IC belt actually changed hands the week before at a house show where Brett dropped the belt to the Mountie.
Because Brett was quote-unquote sick and was told by doctors not to go out and wrestle because he had 104-degree fever.
But he went out anyways.
Because he's Bret Hart.
Which, now we have a problem, though, because previously, 2 months before this, at Survivor Series, Randy was not allowed to go and wrestle Jake the Snake because doctors said he shouldn't go wrestle because he was just bitten by a snake.
Yeah. WWE logic.
WWE logic kicking in. It was really front and center in this pay-per-view.
Yeah. So we have the Mountie defending his Intercontinental title against Rowdy Roddy Piper.
Because after the Mountie beat Brett for the title, he decided to take that title and beat the crap out of Brett a little bit extra with it after the bell. And Piper came out and made the save at that house show.
Yes. So we get Piper versus the Mountie, which, for all intents and purposes, for being a, 5-minute squash match?
It was a really short, one-sided match, yeah.
It wasn't bad.
It was serviceable for what it was.
I mean, if you're trying to essentially use somebody as a transitional champion
Yep.
and put the belt on somebody with a little more name recognition, might be the best way to do it.
I'm pretty sure this whole thing was about setting up the feud between, and it wasn't really even a feud. It was just a match between Piper and Brett was it at Mania? I actually think it was.
Yeah, I think so.
Which was, as I recall, and I'm sure we'll probably actually get to it down the road somewhere, it was a really good match, and it was a weird face versus face match where no one went heel.
Well, I mean, look at the two guys you have in there.
Right. Two incredibly talented workers.
And you could make the argument that even though Piper isn't a heel at that point, he's more of an, if I'm going to mix comic and wrestling terms, he's more of an anti-face.
He can be antagonistic enough, and he was really able to carry that feud on his promo skills because Brett's never been a great promo, but especially further back, he was quite a bad promo.
Yeah.
And I think this probably helped Brett become more comfortable doing promos, having someone so good as Roddy to play off of.
Well, and we'll talk about it later on. Piper ends up being in the Royal Rumble match, and he uses the eye rakes. He uses the hand stomps, stuff that's a little more heelish,
Little more dirty tactics,
but he's using them all throughout his time as a face in the company. So it would be a little bit easier to understand if it's Brett versus an anti-hero.
right.
Piper.
Roddy, he's got that hot Scottish temper that he's known for, so it's kind of a little excused. It's kind of written in that he gets a little heated, and a thing happens.
He does some stuff. We'll let it slide because it's Roddy.
Yeah, it's kind of what he's known for and what he's loved for. So, as you're actually just saying, there was kind of a little mini subplot built into this whole pay-per-view of Roddy Piper has the chance of becoming a double champion in one night, which has never happened before.
Right. And as I'm watching this for kind of the first time, the pop that Piper gets when he comes out,
Oh, Piper was very much beloved, especially by the Albany crowd here.
I mean, that rivaled Finn Balor's pop at Royal Albert or in
Prince Albert?
Blackpool
Yeah.
For the NXT takeover that was this weekend. Like, I thought that was a loud pop, but then I heard this, and back in 1992, that was insane.
Yeah, like you didn't necessarily have people going quite as crazy as they do today.
I mean, he got more of a pop than Hulk did when he came out for the Rumble.
Ooh, they sure did, and we'll talk about Hulk's crowd reaction a little bit later as well.
Yeah.
So, as we said, it was a pretty short squash match. They're really, it was a little bit sad because it kind of seemed like they were trying to build up for more, and for whatever reason, they weren't really allowed to do more. Like, it seemed like they were setting up for Jimmy Hart to get involved somehow, and that never really happened.
Yeah.
I've heard rumors that Piper was maybe a little bit difficult and a little bit of a diva-ish to work with, and maybe kind of his thing was, I'm not going to look weak ever here. So maybe...
Well, I mean, it's not too far off to say that when you're facing the Mountie. Nobody wants to look weak against the Mountie.
Yeah, that's kind of fair, too. I mean, the whole shock stick gimmick and everything was pretty awful back at this time,
So,
anyways, yeah, Piper wins, shocks the Mountie with his own shock stick with the awful over the
lights dimming
loudspeakers.
and
Yeah, it's like I didn't know this cattle prod was tied into the whole sound and audio system here.
Yeah. So, after that match, we get, what was the next one?
Next match, oh no.
Is this the Bushwhackers?
Sure was.
Bushwhackers versus...
The Beverly Brothers. And it wasn't just the Bushwhackers.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's right. Jameson was with them.
And we had the Genius with the Beverly Brothers.
Which I didn't know up until now was Lanny Poffo.
Yeah, sure was.
Those of you that don't know, that's Randy Savage's
yes, Savage's brother.
brother.
So let's talk about Jameson a little bit.
Do we have to?
Yes. First off, we have time to kill. Secondly. So Jameson was supposed to be like the pinnacle fanboy of wrestling. Here's a hint to wrestling promoters that they maybe just now, I think AEW is going to get it, but I don't think anyone else has up until now. If you refer to a character on camera, or in TNA's case, if you refer to your fan base in a courtroom, don't put them down.
Yep.
Jameson was supposed to be like your pinnacle WWE fan. He was a very offensive Woody Allen style New York Jewish person caricature.
Yeah.
He was awful. He was annoying. He was disgusting. He was awful in every sense of the way he could be awful.
Yeah, and the stuff that he was doing at ringside or his interview or on the way down to the ring, if you're going to make fun of your fans, try not to put it on a freaking pay-per-view.
Maybe not be so, yeah, exactly. Don't be so blatant and right up front with it. The absolute pinnacle of how annoying this character was, at one point, he's like outside of the ring cheering on the Bushwhackers, and we'll get to how awful the match itself was in a little bit. We got plenty of ammo on this outside of the ring stuff first. The Genius slaps Jameson, and he goes down like a ton of bricks.
Mm-hmm.
And he's sitting there on the ground crying, "He hitted me."
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be awful with that voice I just did. That was the actual voice that Jameson used. "He hitted me."
Yeah, it was essentially a cartoon voice.
Right, like I said, it was an awful stereotypical caricature of like the Woody Allen character.
Yeah, honestly, I skipped most of that match.
You skipped a lot of the pay-per-view then, because this was a solid 15-minute match.
Yeah, I mean, after they came out, and I think I saw maybe the first 3 minutes of the match, I skipped directly to the end of the match.
It was an awful, awful match because the Bushwhackers are there to walk down to the ring, get the crowd to do the little arm pump dance,
get everybody all excited,
get everyone all excited, do the little battering ram move, take a loss to put over another team,
and move on.
Get out of there.
Yep.
This took 15 minutes. That whole little spiel we just had about what they're there for should never take 15 minutes.
It should, if anything, take less than 10.
The crowd was dead by the 6-minute mark.
Yeah.
This was awful. It went on easily 10 minutes longer than it needed to.
Mm-hmm.
No one looked better for this because the Beverly Brothers were never a real team. It's two job teams against each other.
Dead center in the middle of a freaking pay-per-view. One of your biggest pay-per-views of the year.
Especially back when they only had 4 a year.
Right.
So, like, what was the point of that whole thing? So, we're out here to kill the crowd was apparently their whole thing.
All right. Next match.
Next up was our WWF Tag Team Championship match.
Oh, yeah. That was the Legion of Doom against
the Natural Disasters, Earthquake and Typhoon.
Not an awful match, but not good either.
So, here's the problem with the Legion of Doom. This was the worst case scenario for them. They're normally the two biggest, baddest guys in the ring.
Until you face the Natural Disasters, where they're
giant.
They're twice the size
right,
of
they're
them.
dwarfing the Legion of Doom. And the Legion of Doom isn't good enough as far as diversity of styles to deal with that.
Right. I mean, you have... So I believe when they came out, they said the Legion of Doom was sitting around 500-something pounds total.
Sounds about right. Somewhere between, 5 to 6. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you have the Natural Disasters come out, and they're almost 900 pounds combined.
Right. You have John Tenta, who is a former sumo wrestler, Fred Ottman, who's a big boy.
Right. Like, you can't have the big guys playing the small guys all of a sudden in the Legion of Doom. That's just not how it works.
The Natural Disasters can't go out there and bump around like they're 250 pounds. Like,
right.
Whether you want them to or not, it can't happen. It's not going to be real. There's no way in the world they were ever going to pick either guy up for the Doomsday device for the finish.
Right. That's essentially like having, I don't know, Big Show bump to Brock like Finn Balor is going to do at the Royal Rumble.
Right. Big Show can bump in the Big Show ways, which thankfully Brock can work around.
Yeah, I mean, you have the ring collapse in. That's normally Big Show's big bump, right?
Yeah, that's pretty typical for the two of them.
So you just can't have him get
he's
turned
he's-
inside out by a clothesline like
right,
Finn
he's not going
Balor
to go out
does.
there and like bump his ass off like flying around the ring like Finn would. It's just you can't do that, so you have to change the match accordingly, which someone like Brock thankfully can do. Someone like the Road Warriors don't know how to do.
Right. Wasn't a good match. It was relatively short, if I'm not mistaken.
It was actually 9 minutes. It was
Not-
almost 10, yeah.
I mean, not bushwhackers long, but
Thankfully, not. So, really weird finish to this whole thing. So, it was a count out where everyone starts brawling outside the ring. All 4 guys are out, and then Typhoon rolls in at the last second to get the count out win for the bad guys.
for those of you that don't know, the way that this works is that titles don't change unless you're either submitted or pinned.
Which they made sure to reference before the match ever started. When you hear the announcers say, remember fans, the belts can only change hands on a pinfall or submission, you know you're about to get a screw job ending where someone ain't getting the belt, but it's going to look like they do for a second.
Right. So after that, Jimmy Hart and the Natural Disasters go running to the back screaming.
Oh, well, so here's what happens. We didn't even get there yet. Natural Disasters win by a count out. Jimmy Hart grabs the belts, and the
Oh,
Natural
that's-
Disasters are celebrating in the ring with them.
That's right. They legitimately thought that they got the titles.
How on earth are you a professional? Like, okay, let's pretend wrestling is real. Your job is to go out there and beat up another human being and win titles. How do you not know those rules that the belt doesn't change hands on a countout?
Right.
How does your manager not know those rules?
Exactly.
What kind of guy did you just hire? WWE logic.
So they go to the back and they're screaming that they're going to get their lawyers, that they won the match. They had the belts in their hands and they took them away from them and blah, 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 blah.
What lawyer is going to take that case? Okay, so what's your claim here? Well, we won the match by countout, but then they didn't give us the belt. Well, everyone knows you don't win the belts on a countout. What's your case? Well, they handed us the belts. No, you took the belts. Oh. We'll be going now. Like, what are you getting out of that?
Yeah, it was just awful. And to cap off the rest of the awful undercard,
Yeah, it was the shit cherry on a shit sundae.
yeah, literally.
The undercard was, I really can't emphasize how bad this undercard was in like,
This is especially for a pay-per-view. Like, this is one of the big four.
right, people had to put down like $50-$60 to get this event.
This is one of those events. This is the event that leads up to WrestleMania.
Right. So if I was in this arena, I would have been so pissed off by this point in the night where I'm like, what the hell have I been here for?
Right.
So anyways, thankfully up next, it happens to be the Royal Rumble 1992 match.
Which, like we said at the beginning, probably the best one of the best Royal Rumble matches ever.
Right. So as far as actual Royal Rumbles go, not without some funny or low points in the whole thing, but so let me bring up something here and let me find the order of entry here. Okay, got a list of the entrants in the Royal Rumble for 1992 here. First off, we should mention Bobby Heenan has a clear investment in Ric Flair at this point. They've had a clear relationship. I forget the exact title he uses, but he's in Flair's back pocket.
He called him himself like the prime investor or something like that.
Yeah, and then Mr. Perfect, being Ric Flair's quote unquote manager, but not really, had another title, was like the executive assistant or something. So Bobby Heenan, throughout the entire course of the evening, is going to have an invested opinion in Ric Flair, and I actually really liked that.
I mean, especially because throughout the night, Heenan is saying to like random people, "Go find out what number Flair has."
Yeah.
Or
It-
can I get up for a second so I can go see what number he has?
It really just added something having one of the announcers being so invested in one person in this match.
Yeah, it definitely brought that little extra to bring almost a dire field to this.
It had a lot of Bobby brought a lot of emotion into it, and because he was so panicky. And normally Bobby the Brain Heenan is like the overly smart, snarky,
Calm, cool, and collected guy through
Yeah.
most of it.
very sarcastic, very very mean to the good guys, very up on the bad guys. But now he was like, you felt him backed into a corner, and it really just added a lot to the feel of this whole event.
Yeah.
All right. So, anyways, we start off with the British Bulldog out number 1 and Ted DiBiase.
Good start.
This I feel a little bit bad about this because Bulldog actually throws DiBiase out right before the 2-minute mark, which again played super well.
Mm-hmm.
So Bulldog throws DiBiase out, and right as DiBiase is halfway down the aisle back to the curtain, the buzzer hits, and out comes entry number 3, Ric Flair.
Yeah, and as Flair's walking down to the ring, you have Bobby literally having a conniption.
He loses it, and it's so amazing. And we hear the tagline that we will hear throughout the rest of the evening, and it was great.
It's not fair to Flair.
It's not fair to Flair.
If I would love it if Charlotte would start using that in her pseudo heel that she is right now.
It really would be. She's so advantaged. It would be really funny and ironic.
I think I need to write a letter to WWE about that.
Yeah.
I'll get on that.
Yeah, they need to change her around a little bit, but
Anyway,
so this becomes kind of like the running thing throughout the rest of the night. And so we have actually Flair and Bulldog become a bit of a thing for a while into this Rumble.
I would have been okay with just a match of Flair versus Bulldog. Like they did,
Which
pretty
is
good.
so weird when you talk about the British Bulldog like that. For all the demons he had to face, and for unfortunately everything that happened to Davey, he wasn't great. He couldn't call a match, I think, to save his life, but he could show up when needed.
If he was against somebody who could call the match for him and work with him well, he was a solid talent.
And Flair definitely fits those criteria.
Yeah, I mean, Flair's going to work the heel side of things. Flair's going to call the match to get Davey over, which he did for the better part of, 5 minutes into this match?
Oh, yeah. They went together, and they would get broken up. They would get back together, get broken up. They were really great together.
Yeah, it was pretty solid. Who comes out after
After Flair is Jerry Sags.
which promptly gets eliminated?
Yeah, he was in and out real quick. Then we get Haku. That was actually a really interesting one.
Yeah, because then you have Haku and Flair, the two heels, working against Davey Boy,
A little bit. So
and then all of a sudden,
yeah, Haku comes into the ring and looks like there's an uneasy alliance between him and Flair. Awesome bit of callback here when Bobby Heenan references Haku previously being one of his employees.
mm-hmm.
He's like kind of yelling, Flair, don't do anything to Haku. He's crazy. Don't touch him. Which works well for a while, but then Flair ends up attacking Haku, and then Haku just kind of murders everyone for a while.
Which, I mean, is par for the course for anything Haku if you've never heard any of his outside of the ring stories.
Yeah, pretty great.
We could probably do a whole show on Haku alone.
The Haku stories are amazing. Do yourself a favor, if you've never read the Haku stories, just Google Haku stories, and just the stories other wrestlers had about him are amazing.
Let alone Ric Flair actually saying that Haku was the toughest son of a bitch that he has ever seen anywhere.
Which really raises the question, what the hell is Haku's problem?
We know what Haku's problem is.
We sure do. All right. Anyways, so after Haku comes out the new singles wrestler, Shawn Michaels.
Because just a week before this on TV, Shawn Michaels did the unthinkable.
Well, Shawn Michaels broke up the Rockers, and that coward Marty Jannetty, in an act to try to get away from Shawn Michaels, dove through the window of the barbershop.
Shawn Michaels turned on Marty Jannetty and he completely ruined that friendship for no reason. It was a despicable act.
I mean, not as despicable as Marty Jannetty trying to jump through that window.
That
He
was,
saved him from going through that window.
in case you didn't know, that was our best Bobby Heenan and Gorilla Monsoon. So
You
Shawn
forgot the
Michaels,
would you stop? That's always the classic
would
line.
you stop it? I knew that was going to happen.
Oh, I knew he was going to do that.
So Shawn comes out and he's got that shit-eating grin smirk on his face as he's walking down to the ring.
We actually see sweet chin music for one of the first couple times in this, and boy, did that age well. It was really ugly at first.
Yeah,
That improved with age, I should say.
it was a nasty-looking move to start.
It was just a really lame-ass kick that he threw up that barely ever hit its target, and
But people,
it got a lot better as it went on.
yeah,
After Shawn was Tito Santana, who they actually made a pretty good big deal about being one of the early IC champs, and
yeah, they kind of touted him as being one of the guys who could become IC and WWF champion.
yeah. All right, not a whole lot going on here. Barbarian comes out next. Texas Tornado comes out, and it's really funny. Pretty sure the crowd thought that was the Ultimate Warrior coming back.
Yeah, because he came sprinting down to the ring just like the Warrior.
And he has tassels and the boots and similar physique and the long curly hair.
Big guy with the long blonde hair.
Yeah, so pretty sure everyone thought that was Warrior.
You
And
got
as soon as
the
they
whole-
realized it wasn't, it was,
You got a whole yeah.
oh. Yeah. We've had some eliminations in here. We're not going to do a verbatim play-by-play of this whole thing.
Yeah.
Then we have Repo Man out.
Worst gimmick I have ever seen ever.
It's really bad. I mean,
mean,
this was the start of the. He may have been the start of the awful job wrestlers.
I thought IRS was bad. This guy was worse.
Oh, but by far. After Repo Man, we have our kind of vestiges of the '80s. Greg Valentine.
Which, I mean, they touted him pretty well too.
At one point, he actually puts the figure 4 on Ric Flair, which was kind of something.
Yeah. Because I'm fairly certain wasn't Valentine the first one to use the figure 4?
He wasn't the first guy, but
One of the
much like
earlier
Flair,
guys.
he was one of the. That was kind of his big move of the '80s, along with Flair, and yeah. Then out after Greg Valentine was Nikolai Volkov.
Which, again, a holdover from the 80s.
Yeah, that's your '80s holdover. Then Boss Man actually was up next.
And Boss Man got a decent pop.
He kind of plays the role Kane plays in the 2000s.
The guy who can flip-flop to whatever.
Well, the guy that hits the ring this is kind of one of our first ring clearing spots.
The big guy that comes in, starts tossing people out left and right.
Exactly.
Like when Kane held the record for 11 eliminations in one match.
Right, exactly. It's kind of like in every Rumble, we kind of have our stages of the Rumble. We kind of have like our initial entries in, then the ring, and usually you'll probably have someone kind of keeping it a little bit clear for a while, and then it'll start to pile up and fill up a bit.
And then the big guy comes out and clears out 4 or 5 people.
Yep. So ring clears out a little bit. Then it'll start gradually filling up again.
Then another big guy comes out and clears people out.
And usually before that, everyone, like a bunch of guys will team up to eliminate that one guy.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we have Bossman come out, does the Bossman thing. Then we start letting things fill up a little bit more. We have Hercules come out. Hercules is such a weird guy. Like, always showed up on pay-per-views, never did anything.
No. He didn't seem like anything special when I was watching it.
No. After Hercules, out comes the guy that has a chance at becoming a double champ, Roddy Piper.
And Roddy Piper was kind of that guy again who started clearing people out and spreading the ring out a little bit more.
Yeah, kind of. You'll also notice where usually there's also a guy that kind of is a ring general and kind of directs traffic for a while.
Which
Roddy Piper was probably the guy picked for this event.
If not just to take over for Flair so that Flair could have a break.
Right. And usually the person that's going to be kind of calling most of the Rumble and kind of keeping things on track is definitely a more experienced guy. In one of the more recent Rumbles, it was Jericho.
Yeah, Jericho would. You could always tell that Jericho was going to be calling most of the Rumble because he would come in at like number 10.
Yeah, usually you're in within the first 5 to 10,
Yeah,
and you usually you're lasting until about the final
you're usually there
4 to
until
6.
26-ish,
Yeah, you're usually in there till near the end, till like the final 4 usually or so.
because then whoever is winning usually ends up calling the match at that point.
Yeah.
So actually, in the most recent Rumble where Shinsuke won, that was John Cena.
Right. Cena's another good candidate for that role. Been around long enough, has enough
Jer-
idea of what's going on.
Jericho was the one calling the greatest Royal Rumble, however.
That's what I was thinking of. Perfect.
So
All right.
Piper comes out and he starts to do his little heel stuff. He's raking eyes. He's pulling on at somebody's back and stuff like that.
Yeah, and the thing I'm really going to mention here is if you look at some of the more recent Rumbles, unfortunately, I'm going to call it a guy that has a lot of sympathy built up for him recently. If you go back to the Rumble, the most recent Rumble that Roman Reigns won,
Mm-hmm.
he was another one that was in there for almost the entire thing, but he was laying down in the corner a lot.
Yeah.
Flair never did that. Flair was active, doing a lot this entire Rumble.
There was a couple of spots where he was sitting in the corner, but what would happen is that would be after a face comes out, the face goes after some of the other bad guys and then turns and realizes, oh, look, there's Ric Flair. Let's beat him up.
That's kind of what it was. Is he'd kind of lay back a little bit to give someone else the spotlight for a few minutes.
And then it's, oh, let's beat up Ric Flair.
Right back to Flair. It's not fair to Flair. All right, after Piper was actually Jake Roberts, who at this time was like basically your number 2 heel in the company.
Yeah, and this was at a point where it was only the 3 of them in the ring.
Right. At one point it was Flair and Piper going at it. Yeah, the ring had cleared out. It was just Flair and Piper. Jake comes in, sees that Flair has Piper. He wasn't in the figure 4, but he had him like a headlocker. He had him down on the ground somehow. Jake slides into the ring, just sits in the corner, is like, don't mind me. You guys do your thing. I'll be over here if you need me.
And then as soon as Piper starts to gain the upper hand, that's when Jake comes in and
Yeah,
starts
that's when
hitting
Jake kind of strikes.
Yeah.
All right. Then we have Hacksaw Jim Duggan come out next.
Mm.
Following him, Daddy Wyatt, Erwin R. Shyster.
Mm.
Then Jimmy Supervised Snuka.
Who clearly, you had mentioned the steroid thing, clearly was on them.
Yeah, he was definitely a juicing guy there.
I don't think I had ever seen a picture of that man that big. When he came walking out to the ring, I thought, oh, look, it's another Road Warrior.
Yeah, and the fact that he was so tan really kind of kicks off like that definition. That's why all those
Yeah.
bodybuilders always tan.
He
His darker skin really kind of sets off just how jacked he was.
he looked like a monster, and you could always tell that he was on the steroids because of his stomach, his abs kind of had like that barrel look to him,
Yeah,
and that happens to pretty much anybody who uses. So
fair enough. After Snuka comes one of the guys that was involved in the whole title scene that caused the title to be upheld was The Undertaker.
and this is what, number 20, 21?
Number 20.
So Taker comes out and kind of does the big man clearing the ring thing again.
Yep, he has some eliminations. Unfortunately, Undertaker was still earlier in his career here and ended up falling into a really awful pattern in this gimmick in this Rumble. It's probably one of the worst things about him in this Rumble. If you count the number of times he just goes to grabs the guy around the neck and chokes him in the corner spot, literally probably a dozen times in this.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those where, I mean, I'm pretty sure this was his first Rumble.
If it wasn't his first, definitely at most his second.
So it's one of those where he's not quite the ring general just yet,
Yeah.
and he doesn't really know how to have the spots just yet.
Right, and to be fair, that gimmick is really rather limiting, so there wasn't a ton he could do.
I mean, it's not like he's at the point where he's quote unquote the WWE's most dangerous striker, where he could
Right.
go off into the corner and just start pounding away at somebody.
Yeah, his moveset at this time really was rather limited, so this was kind of a consequence of that. Is you ended up with like the same "I'ma choke you" spot 90 times.
Choke in the corner, choke slam, tombstone. What was the tightrope walk?
Old school.
Old school and snake eyes.
Yep, that's pretty much about him.
Oh, and the big boot.
Big boot. Oh, he did do like a flying clothesline in the ring off the ropes.
Mm.
It was impressive looking for the guy his size. But anyways, out next, Randy Savage. Cool little bit of storytelling continuity here. Jake and Randy were feuding at this time.
Yep.
Randy's music plays. He comes running out. Jake dives out of the ring.
To essentially meet him at the.
No. The opposite. He goes out the other way and hides.
That's right. He rolls out to the. It's on the backside of the ring.
Yup.
And hides from him. And doesn't Randy go after the Undertaker at this point?
Yeah, Randy just kind of goes like he runs into the ring, slides under the bottom rope, and just kind of like stands in the middle of the ring like, huh? What? Where is he? Where's he? Looking around for Jake. Doesn't seem. He's like, all right, fine.
Because isn't this just about the time where Jake and Undertaker were kind of.
They had
Together?
kind of been in cahoots. Yep.
So then all of a sudden, there's a goofy spot where Randy throws Jake out.
Yeah, I think this actually happens a little bit later, but it doesn't really matter. But definitely the time to touch on it. Yeah.
Randy throws Jake out, and Randy promptly follows Jake outside of the ring to beat him up over the top rope.
Yeah, Randy slingshots himself over the top rope because that's how Randy used to exit the ring. He would hold onto the top rope, pull back, slingshot himself over, and jump down to the floor. He did that while doing a double axe handle to Jake and beats him up, and he eliminated himself.
And they had to kind of cover it really quick to essentially say, no, he didn't eliminate himself because you can't.
You have to be thrown over the top rope.
Yeah, according to Bobby and Gorilla, you can't eliminate yourself. You actually have to be thrown by somebody else over the top rope.
So how did Boss Man get eliminated when he went to clothesline someone over the top rope and they ducked out of the way and he threw himself over the top?
Yeah, don't have an answer for you.
WWE logic.
Yeah, that was the most blatant aspect of it.
Right. It was a really funny fuck up, and Undertaker had to slide under the bottom ring, just grab him and throw him back in the ring like none of this happened.
Yeah.
So that was pretty funny. All right. Anyways, after Randy comes out, we had the Berserker, which,
Boo.
again, Huss. And again, not fair to Flair because this guy's whole gimmick was he used to throw people over the top rope to the floor. After the Berserker was Virgil.
Moving on.
After Virgil was Colonel Mustafa, a.k.a. the Iron Sheik.
Moving on.
Then we had the previous record holder for longest entrant in a Royal Rumble, Rick Martel. Then we had the immortal Hulk Hogan.
And Hulk Hogan comes in and promptly starts poking eyes.
Yeah, Hogan's offense is eye pokes and back rakes, and like, how is this a good guy doing all of this shit?
Okay, let me hop on my pedestal here because this is where I have some really, really
Please
hot feelings.
Take the stand.
You are the biggest babyface in all of wrestling from the 80s and arguably the early 90s.
Okay.
Like you said, you've outlived your welcome at this point.
You're starting to overstay your welcome, yes.
How are you going to... And I guess this isn't necessarily on Hogan completely, but also on the WWE. Turn him heel. WCW wasn't afraid to do it. You should have turned this man heel. He's already doing the heel stuff. He's already getting booed by the crowd.
He literally just won the title by taking the Undertaker's urn and taking the ashes and throwing them in the Undertaker's face.
And on top of that, this Albany crowd, because I know we were going to talk about it, and I'm sorry I'm bringing it up now.
Nope, it's all right.
Hogan gets booed. He gets booed when he walks out.
I don't actually know if he got booed when he walked out, but coming up to the end...
According to that review show that you sent me, where the Irish guy and the two British guys were talking about it, he got booed on the way out.
He probably did.
So you have a guy who's literally he's bad. He's a bad guy. He's a bad guy in a time where you have good guys and bad guys.
He was definitely trending bad. People were done. People were done with Hogan.
Why do you not make him bad? Why are you trying to save him? Make him bad. You'll get even more mileage out of him.
Because merch.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Just
I
at
don't
this point, just like John Cena. John Cena with his stupid hair needs to be a bad guy.
I feel like at this point, Cena's made it past that whole "we hate Cena, Cena sucks" thing.
Okay, he still gets booed when he does stuff. Be a bad guy.
Hogan, they definitely should have turned. I think Cena actually survived it and made it through the other side of that whole thing. And people were like, "You've gone away enough that we don't really care now." When he was more omnipresent, it was worse. Now that he only shows up every couple of months, it's a little bit more tolerable.
Either way, needs to be a bad guy.
Yeah.
And if you're not going to turn him bad, don't let him do bad guy things.
Fair. Yeah, definitely. All right. After Hogan was Skinner.
Moving on.
Then we had Sergeant Slaughter.
Okay. They kind of touted him a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of him wrapping up his run from last year where he was the American turncoat.
Yeah,
At this point, it's whatever.
But it was one of those where he's rated at the top of the pack, and he's coming out in the Royal Rumble, and he's fresh.
Yeah, he was high enough up that he seemed like a legitimate threat. So, after Sergeant Slaughter was Sid Justice.
Which, at this point, he's what, number 29?
He's number 29.
This is one that when he came out, he got a pop, and people could have... If you didn't suspect that somebody else would win, I would have put my money on Sid Justice.
He was in the spot, and yeah, he definitely had the build where you could have seen him winning this whole thing. And then obviously number 30, the always cherished spot where you always put kind of your surprise returning guy or someone that has a big story built up around them.
Yeah, usually.
The Warlord.
Who?
Exactly. Your random evil jobber.
So let's boil it down to, let's say, the final three.
Let's do the final four.
Okay.
Final four were Ric Flair, Hulk Hogan, Sid, and Macho.
And Ric Flair at this point has been in the ring for
Almost an hour.
Yeah.
So Sid and Flair team up to eliminate Hogan.
No.
Or sorry,
Macho. Sid's trying to push Macho over. Flair comes running up behind him and hits
Macho,
Yep.
dumps him. Comes into play later because going into Mania, our main event is going to be Macho Man versus Ric Flair. So
Yeah.
kind of a good Royal Rumble will build new feuds and kind of put a little gasoline on the fire of pre-existing feuds.
Yeah.
So this helped highlight the animosity between Randy and Jake and helped kind of build something between Randy and Flair for the coming months after they transition out of those things.
Yep.
So, okay, Macho gets eliminated. Then we have Hogan and Flair kind of tussling on the ropes, fighting with each other.
Yep. And Sid Justice is kind of just standing behind him, staring at him for a minute.
Yeah, kind of like, hey, if you two want to fight, far be it from me to say anything.
And then Sid Justice is like, you know what? Time to do something. And dumps
Hulk Hogan.
To a rousing cheer.
It was possibly the biggest pop of the night.
Hogan getting eliminated, people started to legit clap and get out of their seats for that.
It was such a big pop. And the funniest thing was the next week on Superstars, they would show this part of things and redub the crowd noise and actually redo the announcing to make it look like the fans were so upset by this and that evil Sid Justice blindsided Hulk Hogan.
He turned on his friend Hulk Hogan.
Keep in mind, every previous Royal Rumble, Hulk Hogan has eliminated one of his quote-unquote friends. Did it to Tugboat, back when Typhoon was Tugboat. did it to Hacksaw Jim Duggan, did it to Randy Savage to start their feud.
Yep.
Hulk Hogan does this shit all the fucking time. I'm going to start swearing because fuck Hulk Hogan.
So Hogan does this all the time, and yet all of a sudden, when it happens to him, he's the innocent one.
Biggest travesty in the world. How dare you? What's going on, brother? How you blah blah blah. And how does good guy Hulk Hogan react to being eliminated, not just fairly, but a method he himself has used in previous Rumbles?
He grabs Sid Justice by the arm and holds him over the ropes.
So he could get thrown out by Ric Flair very easily.
So we have Ric Flair as champion.
Ric Flair has now won the Royal Rumble and won the WWF Championship. But who shall we focus on?
Hulk Hogan, of course.
Of course, because fuck Hulk Hogan.
So Flair takes the belt, makes his way to the back.
Nope, we don't even get to see that. Flair
that's
is
right. He just walks off.
Flair is announced as the winner. Hulk Hogan, having just pissed his pants about being eliminated, dives back in the ring and tries to go after Ric Flair.
And
Because that's what a good guy does.
Flair ducks out,
Flair takes a powder, runs to the back.
and Hogan and Justice start yelling and screaming at each other, trying to get at it.
Hogan's
until the
crying to
officials come
every
out.
official there about how this isn't fair. Dude, you got eliminated from a Rumble. You're supposed to be a good guy. What the fuck was that?
Hence me saying he should have been a heel.
He was a heel and all, but he was a heel and everything but the company pushing that angle.
So remember how people started to get upset about Roman being pushed down our throats?
That was nothing.
Hogan was Roman before Roman was Roman.
Sure was. This was just... And again, remember how we spoke about Cena doing business as far as making the business bigger than himself? This was the opposite of that.
Yes.
The WWF has a brand new champion, and it's immediately brushed aside because Piss Pants Hogan is throwing a tantrum in the ring.
Yeah. This is the epitome of the business isn't... I'm not bigger than the business. I should say, if I'm not bigger than the business, then there is no business.
Exactly. And the funniest thing is, earlier in the night, Flair cut one of the best promos ever, basically saying, every championship I've won until now doesn't matter because I'm not the real world champion until I'm the WWF world champion. That's how you fucking put the company first.
Right.
Ric Flair, multiple time NWA WCW world champion, puts over your company saying none of that mattered until now.
Whereas on the flip side of things, you have Hulk Hogan at one point going to Japan and saying, if it means that I don't get this WWF belt, that's fine. I want the New Japan belt.
Hogan was just the worst.
Now do you see why I've always said I would be a Ric Flair guy?
I was watching back then. I was never a Hogan guy. Never got it. Never liked him.
And Flair's promo at the end when he's with Bobby and Perfect.
Right. So they actually have to cut backstage to a promo to the backstage interview to actually see Ric Flair with the belt.
And it's probably one of the best I just won the title promos that I think I've ever seen.
The whole thing, Bobby talking was great. Perfect talking was great. Flair talking was great. That was everything it should have been. All that shit in the ring with Hogan and Sid was everything that should not be a part of the business.
They should have done that in the middle of the ring with Mean Gene and the three of them actually talking about
There
that.
should have been a massive... Never before had the title been up in the Rumble.
We should have had the confetti drop that
There
we
was
get.
a brand new champion crowned. It should have been a massive event. But it wasn't because Piss Pants needed to have his moment of crying in the ring.
Yep. You don't close a WWF show without Hulk Hogan's face on it.
Remember when Christian had his crying baby gimmick?
That's Hulk Hogan's entire career.
That gimmick doesn't hold a candle to Hogan's actual performances.
Yep.
So that bit of the at the end tainting an otherwise really amazing Rumble, which just they did a great job. So trying to reel it back in here, ignoring that bit at the end, they did a really great job at telling overall stories, the stuff involving Macho, Jake, Rick. They did a great job at having little mini stories within the match itself and the night itself, with Roddy possibly becoming a double champ.
Yeah. The feud with Jake and Macho.
Yep. And they just did a really good job at having cool little moments inside of itself, kind of show.
Or, let alone, even the fact that Ric Flair at this point had set the record for the most time in a Royal Rumble until Rey Mysterio when he won the Rumble coming in at number 1.
Yeah, this wasn't something that was happening back then where you were expecting someone that early
to put an hour and 3-minute time into the Royal Rumble.
Yeah. And I was going to say, you also had little snippets of people kind of showing their character off. Like, everything with Jake Roberts was brilliantly done, from the enter into the ring, oh, I don't need to get involved, I'm not going to get involved, to diving out of the ring when...
Holy crap, there's Macho, let me get out of here.
It's like, oh, that guy's pissed at me, I'm out. It's just, there was lots of little snippets that were just really great little moments that made this event, made the Rumble overall really, really great.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Like I said, this is one of the better Rumbles that I think I've ever watched.
If it's not your number one, it's definitely within your top 3, I gotta say.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So, only other real notable thing on the card, we actually forgot to mention this. This was Roddy Piper's only single title win in the WWF.
Which seems like a travesty, but then you think, well, Piper had some of the best feuds in WWF ever, and he never needed a belt to do it.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it would have been nice for someone with his skill level to have those accolades, but they weren't really necessary, and it almost speaks more to his character and personality and career without them.
Because he's not above the business.
Right? I mean, we did mention that he maybe had pulled a little prima donna moment here or there with basically winning the belt in a giant squash match. But
however, for the guy to only have one belt in the entire career of WWE,
right,
I think you can overlook that.
Right. I think overall it was better for the company for that to happen, and yada yada yada. So it may have been a bit of a faux pas here or there, but it wasn't the biggest travesty of the night by any means. So
it's not like he's doing it every night.
Right. It was more forgivable than many other things like this that we've seen.
I think that's about it.
I'm about to say, I think that about does it for us in the Royal Rumble 92.
Yeah.
Plug time?
Plug time.
All right. Got anything to say about this? WrestlingHistoryPodcast@gmail.com.
We're at Twitter at TWI. Nope. WrestleHistPod.
There we go.
That's what it is.
Facebook at Wrestling History Pod. No, Facebook is the TWIWH.
Yes.
Man, can we just hire someone to do plugs for us?
Can we hire somebody to take care of all that social media crap?
Her wives any good at this?
Probably not.
All right. Is anyone out there good at social media? You want a part-time job that doesn't pay anything? We're hiring.
Yeah.
At that pay rate. Let us know.
Spotify, Google Play, and iTunes This Week in Wrestling History.
All right. Next week, I'm not going to say what we're planning next week because every time we do that, it ends up not happening. So,
yeah, it'll be a surprise.
All right. That's out for us for history.